I was slicing into a medium-rare ribeye when my son, Zach, casually dropped the grenade. "I'll be visiting Walter this weekend," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "He's more of a father to me than you ever were." The fork paused halfway to my mouth. I glanced across the table, where Valerie sat smirking into her mimosa like this was a goddamn brunch special, not a public execution. Her eyes didn't flicker, didn't shift. Just thumb-scrolled whatever crap she was giggling at, probably some filtered fishing photo of Walter, the man she used to call just a colleague. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the plate like some daytime TV husband. I stood up, slowly, and placed my knife and fork back on the plate. My palms felt cold, like I'd been standing outside too long in winter without gloves. "Okay," I said. "That's it. Just okay." The silence after that was so thick, you could bottle it and sell it as a tranquilizer. Zach didn't even flinch. That cocky freshman smugness radiated off him like heat. You know the look. The kind where you think you finally outsmarted the old man who paid for your private school, taught you to rebuild a carburetor, and still sends you gas money because you can't focus on both midterms and a part-time job. That was the moment something inside me unlatched. 19 years. 19. I remembered the way he used to grip my thumb with his whole baby hand. The times I showed up at parent-teacher conferences in uniform, still smelling like jet fuel, because Valerie had a headache. I remembered the sleepless nights when he was sick and I held a cold rag to his forehead, whispering stories about stealth bombers and hangars and the stars over Kandahar. And now Walter, a man who showed up with a boat and a beer cooler 5 months ago. Before I go further, if you've ever had a moment where your whole identity gets wiped by someone you loved, especially someone you raised, consider subscribing. 98% of you watch these without hitting that button. It's a small click, but it helps the team more than you know. Keeps the fire lit. Keeps stories like this from getting buried. Anyway, I sat back down. Valerie didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't say a word. Her phone buzzed. She smiled. Not at me. Later that night, I stood in the garage. The steak from dinner was still lodged in my throat like a bullet that never exited. I stared at my old filing cabinet wedged between a rusted engine hoist and a tool chest. I hadn't opened it in years. Third drawer. Bottom left. A sealed envelope. Yellowing. Unopened. Back when Zach was 2, Valerie had gone away for a weekend spa trip. Except she came home wearing a necklace I didn't buy. Her stories didn't add up. So I did what any military-trained mind would do. I pulled strings. Quietly. I ordered a paternity test. But when the results came in, I didn't open it. I couldn't. Zach was sleeping on my chest that night, little hand gripping my collar, drooling on my shirt like he owned the world. But now? Now he had returned the favor by driving a metaphorical tank through my chest with a smug smile in the name of the man who'd been haunting my marriage like mildew. I slid the cabinet open, pulled out the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should. I stared at it under the garage light for 20 silent minutes. And for the first time in years, I did open it. The envelope didn't rustle when I opened it. It hissed, like it had been holding its breath for nearly 2 decades. I unfolded the page slowly. Paternity probability, 0%. There it was. A single line. A sniper shot through my identity as a father. 19 years undone by a lab coat and some numbers. I just stared at it, feeling nothing. No tears. No trembling hands. Just a coolness settling over my bones, like my body was prepping for winter. I didn't need to double-check the date. I remembered exactly when I ordered it. 2 weeks after Valerie came home from that retreat. She smelled like someone else's cologne. Her story changed 3 times. But I buried my doubt, like every loyal idiot does, under a pile of baby toys and late-night feedings. I thought love was sacrifice. Turns out, it was just the first payment on a long con. I set the paper on my workbench and went back to the cabinet. Pulled out Zach's birth certificate. Valerie's signature was bold and clean. Mine looked hesitant, like I already knew I didn't belong there. Then hospital records, bills, vaccination logs. I stacked them like evidence, not memories. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only number I'd saved under break glass in case of fire. Raymond Fields, estate attorney, served with him in Afghanistan. If anyone knew how to burn a legacy and walk away clean, it was him. "Ray," I said when he picked up, "I need to rewrite my will." Pause. Then, "You ready?" I opened the envelope. Another pause. He didn't ask which one. I'll clear my morning. I booked a hotel downtown. Not because I needed space. I needed neutral ground. A place untouched by Valerie's perfume or Zach's entitled footsteps. A place where I could think without the smell of betrayal clinging to the curtains. Room 917. Small suite. 2 rooms. Clean. Quiet. I locked the door behind me, laid the documents out across the bed like a war table, and opened my laptop. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I made a spreadsheet. Every asset. Every account. Every automatic payment tied to that house, that family, that farce. And then I started the rerouting. College fund. Frozen. House deed. Beginning the transfer to a trust. One that didn't include Zach or Valerie. Retirement savings? Set aside for a foundation. One with bylaws very specific about who could ever access the funds. Spoiler, not people who call insurance reps dad. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of traffic 4 floors down. Not a single text from Valerie. Not a call from Zach. Of course not. They assumed I'd retreated into my garage to sulk like I always did. But they didn't know the man who raised Zach was gone. This one wasn't going to cry. He was going to vanish, with the kingdom. So Walter took him to Table Rock Lake last weekend. Valerie chirped over mimosas, stabbing her egg white omelet with too much energy. Zach caught this huge base, practically tackled the poor thing into the boat. God, he was beaming. Her sister, Denise, did that shrill fake laugh women use when they're too afraid to disagree. Well, sounds like the boys bonding. That's healthy, right? Valerie didn't even pause. It is. I mean, Robert was never fun. Everything had to be done his way. Dinner's at 6. No phones at the table. Discipline builds character, he'd say, like we were in a damn boot camp. Zach needs joy. He needs a real father figure now. She said that last part like it was just another bite of toast, casual, easy to chew. Not the kind of thing that slices through a man like piano wire. What she didn't know was that I'd installed a secondary email sync to our shared tablet years ago. For emergencies, I said at the time. Valerie never noticed it auto-backing up her messages and calendar invites to my cloud drive. She also didn't notice that I'd forwarded all Walter's contact details to my attorney earlier that morning. The irony? She used to mock people like Walter. The guy sells annuities, Rob. It's barely above a pyramid scheme, she said once when he drunkenly hit on her at a 4th of July barbecue. Now, she reposted his fishing photos with Zach like they were one big Hallmark moment. Captioned them with things like, father-son day out blue heart. Not stepfather figure, not mentor. Just father. The erasure was complete. No mention of me. No. Thanks to Robert for raising this kid and putting him through 13 years of private school. Not even a half-hearted tag. Zach's smug face glared back from the photos, ball cap backward, holding up a fish with Walter's hand on his shoulder. Same smirk he gave me that night at dinner when he dropped the father bomb like it was a joke I wasn't invited in on. But here's the thing about men like Walter. They like the performance, the applause, the Instagram comments that say, such a great dad, even when they just showed up at the tail end of the movie and demanded the lead role. Walter was divorced, bankrupt twice, and behind on child support for his actual kids in 2 other states. But hey, he brought beer and bait, so I guess that qualified him for Father of the Year in Valerie's deranged little pageant. What neither of them realized was this. I wasn't sulking. I wasn't licking wounds in the garage like I had after the first time I caught Valerie texting an old friend at midnight with a locked screen and a new push-up bra. No, this time, I was already 4 moves ahead. I'd already redirected the financial veins of our lives. I had a new estate plan, new beneficiaries, a new mailing address. I was preparing to vanish like a magician in a puff of legal smoke. And while Valerie played brunch politics and patted herself on the back for redefining family, I was loading the next bullet. Because you don't amputate the man who raised your son and expect him to sit still while you post vacation photos with the infection. Raymond didn't ask for small talk when I walked into his office. Just closed the door, nodded at the chair across from him, and pushed over a thick manila folder labeled Fields Trust Revision. You sure you want to go scorched earth? He asked, tone neutral but eyes sharp. I didn't hesitate. It's already ash, Ray. I'm just labeling the remains. We started with the house. Technically, It was in both our names. But technically, I'd paid every mortgage payment since the day we signed the deed. So we moved fast, created an irrevocable trust under a new entity, one with a board composed of 3 men I'd served with and trusted more than any blood relation I had left. Valerie's name? Removed. Zach? Excluded by clause. A footnote in his own legacy. You want to leave them nothing? Ray asked as he reviewed the draft language. No fallback. College fund. I laughed once, dry and quiet. He told me Walter's more of a father. Let Walter pay for his books. The pension was next. I'd earned it over 22 years of service, from sweating inside a hangar in Kandahar to running diagnostics in Guam. Every cent had been going to our joint account. Not anymore. We rerouted it, cleanly, to a nonprofit I'd just filed paperwork for, the Echo Project, dedicated to aviation tech training for veterans' kids. The bylaws were airtight. No familial access, no nepotism, no leeching. Ray made sure of it. Military benefits? He asked. Redirect those, too. Survivorship benefits? Gone. VA coverage? I'll split it with the Foundation's board. Valerie wouldn't be able to claim a dime. Not even posthumously. Zach wouldn't even get the folded flag. We moved to my investment portfolio. The Roth IRA. The TSP, real estate income from the duplex rental downtown. All of it was restructured. Moved out of their orbit and into another reality. One where I existed solo. By noon, it was done. My digital footprint had already been scrubbed from our joint finances. Passwords reset. Shared accounts emptied with quiet, legal precision. Not stolen. Not hidden. Transferred. With documentation. Everything above board, but completely inaccessible to them. Ray leaned back, sighing. You're not doing this out of spite, are you? No, I said. I'm doing this because I finally opened the goddamn envelope. He nodded once and started stapling packets together. I watched the papers pile up, trust agreements, amendments, notarized affidavits, and felt lighter, not happier, not free, just cleared for takeoff, like the system's check before a long-haul flight. Emotionally unburdened. Operational. It's funny how quickly love decays into logistics. You build a life for decades, brick by brick. Then one bratty sentence and a brunch photo later. You're in a downtown office with a guy who once patched up your shoulder after shrapnel tore it open, signing away the future you thought was set in stone. But stone cracks, especially when you realize it was hollow. And now, every brick was being relayed. Carefully. Without them. We met at a place Zach used to love when he was a kid, Mike's on 4th. Greasy booths, bottomless fries, and those damn milkshakes he'd beg for every birthday. He used to sit across from me, legs swinging, reciting every Transformers fact like it was classified intel. Now, he showed up late, half distracted, AirPods still hanging out of one ear like a fashion statement. Didn't think you'd actually call, he said, dropping into the booth. Didn't offer a hug. Just grabbed a menu like this was some transactional courtesy he was tolerating. I needed to give you something, I replied. He perked up. That got his attention. The spoiled, flickering gleam of a kid who never once considered that you might take something away. I reached into my coat and slid the box across the table. It was flat, wrapped in navy paper with a thin red ribbon. Not festive, just formal. What's this? He said, lifting an eyebrow. Your inheritance, I said, calmly. Early. He grinned. Cocky. Like I'd just caved. Like I'd finally accepted that Walter was here to stay, and this was my way of buying my way back into relevance. Didn't think you'd go sentimental, he joked as he tugged the ribbon off. Is this, like, photos? Or wait, is this that old watch you wore during deployment? I said nothing. Just watched. He peeled the paper back, opened the box, and froze. It wasn't a watch. Not a photo. Just a single piece of paper framed behind glass. Thick cardstock. Official letterhead. One sentence highlighted in yellow. Paternity probability, 0%. His lips parted. A sound tried to escape, but it never made it past his throat. His fingers trembled a little, then steadied, anger simmering just beneath the surface, fighting for a foothold. What is this? He muttered, blinking fast. The truth, I said, reaching for my coffee. You wanted Walter. You got him. He looked up at me like I'd just pulled a pin on a grenade and smiled while handing it over. His jaw clenched. He shook his head once, as if denying reality could push it back into the frame. You're lying. No, Zach. I lied for 19 years. That was the lie. This is clarity. His eyes darted around the room, probably hoping someone else heard this, someone who might intervene and explain how this wasn't real. That the man across from him wasn't calmly severing a bond he thought was unbreakable. Does Mom know you had this? I tilted my head. She knew what mattered. She knew who your father wasn't. And she let me wear that title anyway. He looked down at the frame like it was ticking. Why now? He whispered. I shrugged. You said Walter was more of a father. You wanted a new legacy? Fine. But you don't get to wear my name and spit in my face. He looked 20 years younger in that moment. Just a scared kid who ran too far ahead in the grocery store and realized the hand he grabbed wasn't mine. But I didn't reach for him this time. I let him stand there with the wrong hand. I paid for your school, I said, voice low now. I taught you how to drive. Sat in ERs when you broke your wrist. Missed deployments. Missed promotions. Also, you'd have a better shot than I ever did. He said nothing. The cockiness had drained out of him like a punctured tire. All that was left was silence. Your inheritance, I repeated, nodding toward the box. Frame it. Burn it. Hand it to Walter. Doesn't matter. Then I stood, dropped a 50 on the table. No goodbye. No hug. No fatherly advice. I walked out and left him sitting there with the only legacy he ever really earned. Truth. The garage door hadn't even finished closing behind me when I heard the front door fly open. Valerie's voice came crashing down the hallway like a siren. Shrill, panicked, furious. She didn't wait for subtlety. No mask. No diplomacy. Just straight into full-volume rage. You humiliated him. She screamed, heels clacking toward the kitchen like they were fueled by gasoline. At a public restaurant. With paperwork. I was already at the bar cart, pouring 2 fingers of bourbon into my glass. Neat. Slow pour. Letting the silence between us stretch, because I knew she hated silence more than anything. She thrived on control, on narrative, on playing the aggrieved matriarch. But tonight, she was reacting. And I was calm. I took a sip. I gave him what he asked for. Valerie stood at the kitchen entrance, face flushed, eyes wild. She looked like someone had ripped the leash off her life. And in a way, I had. He's just a boy, Robert. He was confused. No, I cut in, setting my glass down with a soft clink. He was clear. He said Walter's more of a father. So I gave him the opportunity to act like it. Her jaw trembled. I watched it happen. Watched the fury crack at the edges, revealing something closer to panic. You blindsided him, she hissed. No, I said. I waited 19 years. She went silent then. Only for a second. Then the hands went to the hips. Classic Valerie posture, right before the nuclear launch codes. I will take you to court, she spat. This house, that pension, the savings, we built that life together. You think a piece of paper is going to keep you safe from? I held up a second folder. This one slimmer than the wool packet, but somehow heavier. I slid it across the counter like a dealer tossing down the river card. Already moved everything into a trust, I said. Irrevocable. Effective immediately. You're not a trustee. Neither is Zach. She stared at the folder like it bit her. You can't just. I can. I did. She picked it up with trembling hands and flipped through it. Her lips moved silently as she scanned the legal language, her eyes darting, searching for some backdoor, some clause that would let her wriggle out like she always had. But there was nothing. Just signature pages with my name already dry, notarized, witnessed. I'd cut her out of the equation like a tumor. Surgically. Legally. Permanently. This isn't fair, she whispered finally. The volume shift was like whiplash. Fury to fear in 4 seconds flat. I picked up my glass again. Neither was raising a son to call someone else, Dad, while cashing checks from me. She looked down at the folder again, hands limp, mouth slightly open like she wanted to cry but couldn't justify it. Not with the facts staring her in the face. You think you're the victim? She snapped, voice cracking. No, I said. I was the fool. And I'm correcting that. She flinched. That one hit deeper than the paperwork ever could. I left the room. Let her stand there in the kitchen, the one I remodeled with my bonus from Afghanistan, clutching papers like they were going to reverse time. But she knew. It was over. She didn't just lose a husband. She lost the narrative. And I wasn't sticking around for the rerun. Zach's dorm mailbox clicked open with the same lazy carelessness he showed everything. He was hungover, again, and pissed that the cafeteria had stopped serving eggs by noon. He yanked the small brown box from inside. No return label, just his name handwritten in the corner in neat block letters. He almost didn't open it. Thought maybe it was something from Valerie. Or worse, another pity care package from Walter with trail mix and some motivational book he wouldn't read. But back in his room, legs sprawled across a thrift store futon and vape cloud hanging in the air like a curtain, he tore into it. The photos spilled out like a broken dam. Loose prints. Dozens of them. 4x6, glossy. Him as a toddler on Robert's shoulders, arms in the air like a superhero. Him at 7, holding up a Pinewood Derby car with Robert kneeling beside him, grease on his jeans. Him asleep in the back of a station wagon during a cross-country drive. Christmas mornings, basketball games, scraped knees bandaged by military calloused hands. All of it. 19 years of proof that someone had shown up. Again and again. Without fail. On top of the stack, a single note, handwritten in that same clean, quiet print. For the man who wanted another father. Good luck. His breath caught. Just for a second. He dropped the photos like they burned. He grabbed his phone, thumb trembling, screen smudged, scrolled to Walter's number and hit call. Voicemail. Hey, call me back? Just need to talk, man, he said, trying to keep his voice light. Like he wasn't sitting in the middle of 19 years he'd just casually thrown in a dumpster with one sentence. No callback. That night, he tried again. Still nothing. On the third attempt, Walter's voicemail was full. Zach stared at the screen, thumb hovering, hoping maybe Valerie could talk some sense into him. But even she wasn't replying to texts. And the last voicemail from her was just static and sighs and a clipped, "I don't know what to say, Zach." By midnight, the photos were spread across his floor like a crime scene. He cracked a beer, then another, then switched to bourbon someone left behind after a party 2 weeks ago. He drank it warm, straight from the bottle. Somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., he opened his closet, pulled out the shoe box where he kept old birthday cards, and found one from Robert. "Proud of you, son. Always." He stared at that word. Always, like it was a curse. In the corner of the room, the framed DNA test still sat propped on a chair. He hadn't thrown it away. Couldn't. Every time he tried to convince himself it wasn't real, he'd remember Robert's face across that diner table. Calm. Icy. Done. He opened his window and looked out over the campus. Lights in other dorms. Laughter faint in the distance. A girl shouting something drunk and happy down the hall. But his room was dead quiet. Zach slumped to the floor and sat there until morning. Phone silent. Walter silent. Valerie useless. The world didn't pause for the boy who told the wrong man he didn't need him. And now, there was no one left to pick him up. Valerie first noticed something was off at the grocery store. The cashier scanned her wine, her overpriced organic strawberries, her gluten-free crackers. Total came to $183 and some change. She smiled, slid the joint credit card across the terminal, and waited for the cheerful beep. Declined. She chuckled awkwardly. Let's try that again. Declined. The teenage cashier shifted uncomfortably. Valerie pulled out another card. Her backup, one Robert had opened years ago under both names for household stuff. Declined. By the time she left the store, without groceries, cheeks burning, she was already on the phone with the bank. 10 minutes of hold music later, she got her answer. The accounts in question were dissolved last month, ma'am. Ownership now belongs to a trust. Your name isn't listed. She barely muttered a thank you before hanging up. Back home, she stormed into the bedroom and flung open the bottom drawer where she kept the just-in-case folder. Bank statements, insurance papers, a title for the SUV Robert had leased 2 years ago when Zach started college. She stared at the vehicle registration. It no longer said Robert and Valerie Thompson. The new name, Echo Veterans Foundation. Her hands started to shake. She rushed outside, down the driveway, half expecting the car to be gone already, and threw herself into the driver's seat. Dashboard lit up like usual. She tried to breathe. It was fine. Just a clerical thing. Robert wouldn't actually. The tow truck arrived the next morning. Right on time. She ran outside barefoot in a robe, waving her arms like a madwoman. This is my car. The driver didn't flinch. Ma'am, title says otherwise. She screamed, threatened legal action, demanded names. He handed her a card. Please contact Echo Veterans Foundation for asset inquiries. Her world started to collapse in slow, calculated fragments. That afternoon, she opened her email and found a statement from her investment advisor, one Robert had originally picked. The subject line, final statement, account closed. Balance, $0. She called, screamed, demanded answers. Mrs. Thompson, the advisor said, his voice like sandpaper, Robert moved those funds months ago into a nonprofit. There's nothing under your name. In fact, your access was revoked per court-approved transfer. I believe the foundation is in his name now. Neighbors started whispering by the weekend. The Barretts next door mentioned the car being towed. Someone else said they saw her at the corner store paying with cash. Actual bills, folded clumsily, like she hadn't touched paper money in years. I thought they had savings, one whispered. Didn't they refinance the house last year? Didn't she just go to Cabo? Whispers turned to rumors. Rumors turned to pity. Valerie locked herself in the house with the blinds closed and the thermostat stuck at 62. Her phone kept dinging. Zach asking for help, updates. Have you talked to him yet? But she ignored them. What was she going to say? That she didn't know anything? That the man she mocked for being too rigid had just dismantled her entire lifestyle without breaking a sweat? She poured herself wine from the last unopened bottle in the house and sat on the floor next to the empty spot in the garage where the car used to be. Everything she took for granted, gone. Credit, gone. Savings, gone. Respect, gone. And the most devastating part? She finally realized Robert hadn't just walked out. He had erased her. It was the smell of mildew that finally dragged her into the garage. Valerie had ignored it for weeks. The damp, the dust, the silence. That garage had always been Robert's domain. Orderly, obsessive, sacred. The walls lined with labeled drawers, every wrench and socket placed with military precision. Even after he left, she couldn't bring herself to open that door. Not because she missed him, but because stepping inside meant acknowledging just how thoroughly he was gone. But now, with the fridge nearly empty, her phone plan downgraded, and the neighbors pretending not to look at her recycling bin full of empty bottles, she finally cracked. She needed answers. Access. A backup. Something. She pushed open the side door. The smell hit her immediately. Old cardboard, rubber, and something she couldn't name but recognized as stale certainty. Everything in the garage was untouched, except for one thing. The tall gray filing cabinet in the corner, the one Robert kept locked for years, now had a note taped to the top drawer. White paper, thick black ink. Her name written across the center in those same block letters she once called charming back when she still noticed the way he wrote thank you cards. She stared at it for a long time before peeling it off. Hands shaking, breath catching. Valerie, I knew for years. But I stayed for the boy. You broke both of us. Goodbye. No signature. No date. Just that. Cold. Precise. Final. Her knees buckled before she even realized she was sitting. The cement floor felt ice cold through her leggings. She held the note in her lap, like it might still warm back to life if she stared hard enough. She opened the top drawer, frantic now, looking for anything. A trail, a mistake, something he'd left behind that she could leverage. But all the drawers were empty. Clean. Cleared. The only thing left was a tiny brass key taped to the inside of the bottom drawer. It fit nothing in the garage. She knew what it meant. It was symbolic. A gesture. Here's the key. Too bad the doors are already gone. Her justifications began to spiral. He's being vindictive. He's overreacting. Zach didn't mean it. I was just trying to give him space, balance, warmth. Robert never knew how to be fun. He never knew how to loosen his grip. But even her own thoughts sounded hollow. She had rewritten their story so many times over the years. First, she was the overworked wife of a cold technician. Then the unappreciated mother doing everything alone. Then the liberated woman finally choosing joy. But Robert's letter, so small, so devastating, slammed every version shut like a vault. He knew. He had always known. And still he stayed. Not for her. For the boy. And now even the boy was gone. Drifting, untethered, betrayed by the very illusion she'd sold him. She pressed the paper to her chest and sobbed. Not the delicate cries she used for social leverage, but the kind of guttural collapse that cracks in the base of the spine. The kind of grief reserved for people who realize, far too late, that they were never the victim. She had weaponized forgetfulness, crafted excuses, dismissed loyalty, mocked structure, and now, all she had left was the echo of a man who left no trace, except the truth she was never supposed to find. And he hadn't just said goodbye. He'd disappeared so thoroughly that even regret had no one left to call. The hangar echoed with the sound of rivet guns and laughter from local kids on a school field trip. Robert adjusted the aviation goggles on a curious fourth grader's head and smiled as the boy grinned up at him, eyes wide beneath oversized lenses. "This one flew combat out of Ozen in '88, he said, tapping the side of an old A-10 Thunderbolt, the gray paint still proud despite the years. "Tough bird. Took a hit to the wing, made it back anyway." The boy nodded with reverence, then sprinted off to tell his friend. Robert exhaled slowly, hands in his pockets, the crisp Missouri air laced with engine oil and quiet purpose. This was his new rhythm. For days a week at the museum. No chaos. No yelling. Just metal, memories, and a younger generation too young to know what betrayal smells like. Around noon, while shelving a decommissioned altimeter, his friend Jim strolled in with a crooked grin. "You see this," he said, holding up his phone. "Your ex is on Facebook hawking her designer dining set. Says it was an unexpected life transition." Translation: she finally realized Walmart won't take sob stories as currency. Robert chuckled once. No bite, just air moving past old scars. Jim nudged him. "You good?" Robert nodded. "Yeah." She always hated that table, anyway. When the shift ended, Robert drove home, not to the old house, of course. That had new locks, a new address, a different view. He downsized, condensed, fit his life into something quiet, something earned. He found the envelope in his mailbox. No return address. Plain white. Not torn or smeared. Just waiting, like a ghost that still knew his name. He opened it at the kitchen counter, hands steady. "Dad, I was wrong. I miss you." 3 lines. Sloppy handwriting. No signature, but he didn't need one. He looked at the words for a long time. Not out of sentiment, but calculation. As if rereading them might clarify whether they were apology or manipulation. But they didn't shift. They stayed just as they were, an aftershock. He thought briefly of Zach at 12, begging to sleep in the garage with him while he tuned the Mustang. Of the teenage tantrums. The late-night drop-offs. Of the exact moment Zach, full-grown, had smiled and chosen another man. That was the last time Robert gave him anything. He folded the letter once, then fed it into the shredder. The whirring sound was soft, almost apologetic. There were no speeches, no dramatic sighs, no cinematic swelling of regret. Just paper turning to dust, like a chapter closed in a language he no longer spoke. He poured himself a small bourbon, opened the back door, and let the wind in. Outside, a jet traced a line across the sky. Precise. Inevitable. He watched it disappear. Not with anger. Not with sorrow. Just with the clarity of a man who finally understood. The inheritance was never cash or property or last names. It was truth, and he'd given it freely. But betrayal had its price. And that price was silence.